Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Video 8, Module 8, Podcast Episode 8 of Filmpreneur. Filmpreneur is inspiring and empowering filmmakers and creative professionals to create massive positive change in the world by creating and incorporating sustainable business in, of course, the film storytelling space. So today we are going to talk about a little bit of a marketing conversation. So far in all of the modules, I've been sharing my story about building Hemmings House to a point. We've been extrapolating a lot of lessons pulled out from some of the challenges, some of the lessons learned, some of the wins as well, some of the things that we've done right in this business. Believe it or not, there's a few things that we've done right. I think once you get past the that 7-year mark and you're still alive and growing, you're doing pretty good. I think it's called the 7-year itch in marriage. Like after the 7th year, if you're not divorced yet at that point, you're doing pretty good. It's the same thing with a startup business. If you make it past 7 years, you're doing good. So we're well past a decade now in doing this. So we've learned a lot along the ways. Now, one of the benefits of being in business for over a decade is you start to create a natural brand awareness just by the sheer fact of being around forever. Every single year you build new contacts and your network grows and you make more impact and people start to know your work. And it's just one of those natural evolutions. The problem is that takes a long time to do. If you're in a startup mode, how do you let people know what you're doing? How do you let people know what your film company cares about, what you care about as an entrepreneur? Where do you sit in the whole spectrum of film professionals in your community? Why do people want to buy from you? See, traditionally, what people would do is spend a lot of money on advertising and marketing. And, there was a time, there's actually a story in the last episode that I consider, I hate to use the word fail, but I've used fail a few times. I've considered a little bit of a professional challenge is when I purchased another company that was not in the creative space. Essentially, I purchased a service franchise. It was a bathroom renovation company, and it was an excellent company. But I bought it just because I thought it could make extra money without me working on it at all. It's just one of those things, you hire a bunch of employees to run it, and I keep on growing Hemmings House, and it would make me extra money. The problem is, or the lesson I learned is, anytime you are growing a business, you need to give 150% to that business. So even though that smaller company, the bathroom renovation company, was a good, solid company on its own, it needed me. It needed me 150% of the time. But there's only one of me. And Hemmings House needs me 150% of the time too. So I went through a couple of years of real struggle with that particular instance, which again, I consider my MBA. Going through what ultimately was a fail, but at least you tried something, is ultimately a really positive thing. But I'm going through this because I'm telling you this, one, to learn from the fact that if you've got a goal, like in my case, it's to build a film production company that's relevant and that makes change, you got to stick to that goal. You got to stop dreaming about doing all these other things. Even today, I still struggle with that because I'm so excited as an entrepreneur to find new opportunities. I love shiny objects, all of these sort of things. Thankfully, I've got a really kick-ass management team, leadership team, and advisor board that keeps me focused, because a lot of times creative entrepreneurs have a hard time focusing on that end goal in growing a business. I'm still working on that. Anyway, that was one reason I wanted to bring up that sideline of a business outside of our industry that I tried to get involved with. The second reason is it's a traditional business that I had. It was a bathroom renovation company. And to make that bathroom renovation company work, by franchise law, you had to commit to spending 15 to 30% of your monthly revenues on marketing. So let's say you're doing 100,000 of sales a month. Well, you could be spending up to $30,000 in newspaper ads, mailers, social media, all this sort of thing. 30 grand. That's a salary for a lot of people, So it's a lot of money to spend. So what I'm trying to say in this particular module is in the creative space, we don't need to be sending out advertisements in that traditional form. We don't need to be spending 30% of our target revenues on advertising either. But there is a small equation that is similar that I use, which is, let's not use 30% of revenues, but let's use 30% of our time as as the faces of the company, as the CEO of the company, whoever is the one that's going to be building your brand, and in most cases it's going to be you yourself, it is critical to spend between 15 and 30% of your time getting in front of people, public speaking, hosting your own podcast, making your own videos on YouTube, creating events, all of this sort of thing, writing blogs, writing in traditional magazines. All of these things are what build your brand in an organic way. And we call that content marketing. When you are enjoying the benefits of great marketing impact through giving the world content, and typically you give that content for free, whether it's a kick-ass blog about the best ways your company can succeed this year by using video, or whether it's perhaps even like for me, for example, in our provincial newspaper that a lot of my customers actually read, I write a travel article. I've been doing it for probably 5-6 years now. No, in fact, I'm going to time date this right now a little bit. My very first article was the day that Obama got inaugurated, and I was in Hawaii when it happened. So that would have been, well, secret's out, you can do the math. That was 9 years ago is when I started writing in this particular newspaper. And it's funny because I'm not talking about filmmaking by any means, but what I am talking about is all the places in the world that I've been traveling, because it's a travel article, and just the way I write it, people know that I'm traveling for work. And it's just one of those things. It doesn't matter where I go in my market or region. People are like, oh, hey, where have you and Hemmings House been this week or last month or whatever? Because there's this little legend around us in our market that Hemmings House is really traveling around the world. And you know what? It's not a legend. There's a lot of truth to it. But I think people think that we are out there far more than we really are. Because we put ourselves out there, we share information, we share, and in my case, I've been doing it by writing in a traditional newspaper. Who would have thought that a traditional newspaper in this day and age would actually become one of our, most powerful marketing and brand elevation tools? But along with newspapers, I'm a very consistent blogger. So I've got a blog on medium.com. So if you go to medium.com @Greg Hemmings, you'll see my blog. There's another old blog that sits on the internet somewhere. And it's so funny because it's on this platform called Blogspot, which I don't even think exists anymore. But it's so old that I don't even know what the login password is. And back when I was writing in it, I had an old email that I don't have anymore. I have no access to get into this blog, but it still exists on the internet. And it's called the Airplane Journals. And if you look up Greg Hemmings Airplane Journals, you're going to read some really kind of free-form writing, kind of Jack Kerouacian writings. But it was all about my times in the early days of Hemmings House. And before that even as well. And I call it Airplane Journals because the only time I had time to write my blog was when I was flying on an airplane to whatever the next gig was. And I was on airplanes all the time. I still am. The negative part is our carbon footprint is pretty large because of all the airplanes we're on. But by nature of what we do as filmmakers, as documentary filmmakers, our stories typically are outside in the world. So we do have to travel a lot. But I digress. There's lots of blogging I've done over the years. So if you Google my name, Greg Hemmings, there are other Greg Hemmingses in the world, but I will be right at the very top because I've been blogging for years. And even if the blog isn't about filmmaking specifically, it's about values. It's about what is it that I believe in? What is it that my company believes in? Because at the end of the day, people want to work with people they trust. And one of the best ways to do that is to express it through the content that you create. So in developing yourself as a thought leader, just think of it this way. How much content can you share with the world for free that lets people know what you do, that gives them valuable information to help them on their journey? It's all about helping and giving, being incredibly sharing and full of abundance. Like you've got enough knowledge that you want to share it with others, and you want to help other people, including your competition. Do not forget about that. Remember, you don't have competition with what you're doing. What you do is so unique, and you have your place in the market. And remember, your market is the world. Even though you might just be playing in your local space, don't use the fact that you are the smaller version or the smaller entity in your competitive market because your market's so small as an excuse. You can't do that because the world is your market. And with that, you have no competition. But let's say you've got other companies doing similar things as you and perhaps sharing the same customer resources. Help them out. The more you can help what we traditionally would call competitors, the more you're going to be in a position of thought leadership, even within the competitive space. Because you do not want to be enemies with your competitors. You want to be friends with them. Friends will take care of each other at the end of the day. And this is a really important bit. So becoming a thought leader out in your market, but also within your industry. If you become a thought leader by helping, sharing, promoting, and growing people who in other worlds who are not filmpreneurs would consider competition, you wouldn't believe how fruitful that experience becomes. Another thing that we do at Hemmings House is we've got a podcast called the Boiling Point Podcast. Now, the neat thing about this is it's got nothing to do with filmmaking either, but we interview every single week, and I think we're well above 200 episodes now. You can just go to theboilingpointprocess.com and take a look. We interview entrepreneurs and social change makers every week. We've been doing it for years. And you'll see people like, Chris Hatfield, the International Space Station commander way back in the day. You see, these social media gurus like Dino Dogan, good buddy of mine, advisor to our company as well. There's all these different really interesting people, a ton of B Corps as well, and social venture network folks. And what we're talking about with them is stuff that elevates their story. So essentially, we're giving a free platform to other entrepreneurs that may or may not ever use Hemmings House, but we're giving them a voice and amplifying their story through a medium that isn't our core medium. Like, we're not an audio production company, but one of our best ways of getting messages out and sharing other people's stories is through our podcast. So what does that do? Well, number one, yes, it is possible that some of our guests might end up working with us. Really cool. Because when you invite someone onto a podcast and you share their story, you started a relationship, you started a friendship. And what I said before is people like to work with people they know and trust. And even more so, people like to work with friends. So as a friend-making tool, podcasting is awesome. Another amazing benefit to a podcast is if there's somebody you want to meet or somebody that you want to do business with, invite them on a podcast. Nobody says no to podcasts. It's like, because podcasts aren't status quo yet, they're still kind of in that early majority stage of popularity. Most people are saying yes. So if you call someone up and that person might be somebody you want to work with. For example, we've always wanted to work with Patagonia. We love Patagonia. That's, for us, it's a holy grail of purposeful social impact, environmental impact companies, triple bottom line companies. Patagonia is also a B Corp. So what was a way for me to start a relationship with Patagonia? I invited two of their executives on as podcast guests over the last few years. Now I've got a legit relationship and essentially an open door invite to continue a conversation. The third way podcasts, and in fact, this is also true for every other medium of content marketing, but for podcasts is we're giving our community a gift, another free gift of knowledge. We're knowledge sharing. So we're helping the person that we're interviewing, we're helping the community that's listening, and we're helping ourselves by creating meaningful connections and enjoying a marketing and brand uplift. But content marketing and building thought leadership doesn't end there either. Events are huge. Remember, when we're talking about creating relationships, as much as we possibly can, let's make those relationship building experiences in person if we can. Like, if you've got a podcast, try to get them into the booth with you. If they're from away, you get them on Skype before telephone, so you're making that eye-to-eye contact. Human relationship, all the fundamental rules that we all understand about building relationship apply here. The more close you are physically with these people, the more strong your relationship can be. And if you want to work with these people, these are phenomenal ways to do it. Okay, so putting in events. And what's an event look like? It could be just a straight up party saying, hey, we're turning 5 years old. We're throwing this wicked party. Come on down. We've got a local brew pub supplying the beer, and we've got a band and a DJ. It's going to be fun. Bring people together. People will thank you for showing up. It gives you an excuse to talk about what you're doing with the business. Another thing that we've done is we've hosted talks, kind of like little mini TED Talks, if you will, about social impact and how the business community can really step up and creating stronger and more inclusive communities. So we give all these other change makers and thought leaders the platform to get on stage in front of a big audience and just talk about stuff that they care about. That's a great event concept for us. We've got an event that we're going to put on in Toronto called the Love Economy, and we're doing it in New York in a few weeks in New York City, and essentially we're pulling people from all different business backgrounds together to say, how do we use our businesses to change capitalism as we know it, to change the economy from one that's based on greed and fear to one that's based on love and abundance. And it's as simple and cut and dry as that. It's got nothing to do with being fluffy or hippie or anything like this. It's like, are we building businesses to be greedy and selfish and destructive, or are we building businesses to add value and really truly create a shared prosperity for all stakeholders in the world? So events, again, another great one. And I have to tell you, for all of these, public speaking as a skill is something that you have to practice and invest in, because I've got a long ways to go in my journey as a public speaker, but I've had the opportunity to be invited to speak at 2 different TEDx's already, at a number of conferences. I've been paid quite a bit to be keynotes at different conferences as well. You get to a point where you're telling stories of value so much that people want you. They're calling you, they're booking you for speaking gigs because you're always telling some sort of a story of value. And the more you get in front of audiences at conferences, the more your brand elevates as a thought leader. And public speaking is critical to that. Public speaking is critical to your events. Public speaking is critical to your podcasts. Public speaking is critical when building any sort of relationship where you have to communicate. So every single community has a Toastmasters. Start there. Find your local Toastmasters group and just go. It's like next to nothing. It costs hardly anything to join. And it's just a good, safe place to practice. And perhaps you're at a place where you're a little bit more advanced and maybe you feel like you don't need Toastmasters, but there's all these other great organizations, these national organizations of professional public speakers that you can get involved with, but just do it as much as you possibly can. So I've gone over traditional print, digital print through blogs. I've gone over public speaking, events, and podcasting. Content marketing is huge. There's so many more elements to this, including, gaming. There's just so many different elements. There's art, there's music, there's all these different ways to connect to people through creative engagements. But these are the ones that I use. Again, starting writing in the newspaper, writing in blogs, making videos, got a YouTube channel, event production, public speaking, and podcasting. Just as an interesting side note, we have another sister course, and it's called the Boiling Point Process. And I'll give you links in the notes below if you want to take that course. It's really affordable. You can hop in there, and we go into much deeper detail about content marketing and building your thought leadership in your market. And this is not just for filmmakers. This is for anybody who's interested in increasing their position of thought leadership. The boilingpointprocess.net you can take a look at. And we will also be finding discount codes for anybody who are part of the Filmpreneur course. You'll be able to get some really steep discounts on that course as well. So we'll let you know more about that in the notes below. And if you're listening on the podcast and you're not part of the Filmpreneur, make sure you go to filmpreneur.net while you can and get into this course, because right now you're only listening to elements of this. You might as well watch it and get as much of a rich experience as you possibly can as we learn collectively how to become filmpreneurs. Now, there's just a couple more things I want to cover in this episode about growing your brand, growing your market, and finding opportunities. And the next 2 things is just talking about courses and markets. So courses are another way to connect with other people. For me, for example, I took a course called the North American Media Executive Leadership Program, and that was out in Winnipeg. And for that program, we learned really how to be solid, strong executives, CEOs of film companies. It's kind of like what we're doing here with Filmpreneur, but far more robust and in person. It's going to be very similar to what we're going to do with our Filmpreneur Summit, which I'll tell you more about later on. But for me, I took this course, 10 years ago or so, and it connected me with people who are now industry leaders across this country. I now have a network of people who are students with me in that really competitive course to get into. Another course that I did was the NSI, the National Screen Institute. And And that was actually based out of Winnipeg. The first one, the North American Media Executive Leadership Program, was actually based out of Banff. But for the NSI program, they took us to MIPCOM over in France. And that was actually my second time to MIPCOM. But MIPCOM is the global meeting place for all television producers, distributors, and broadcasters in the world. So if you want to get connected on the global stage, invest the money, go to your local economic development corporation, see if you can get a little bit of your travel covered, and get to Cannes twice a year and get to MIPCOM or MIPTV. In North America, we've got other markets, such as Real Screen in Washington. We've got Banff over in, Banff. And where else would it be? And there's all these other great markets that you go to where there's essentially conferences, learning, workshops, a lot of keynotes, but it's a buyer-seller market. So you essentially have the opportunity to speak to everybody who's going to buy your content. And that could be a Discovery Channel or a CBC or an Oprah Winfrey Network, or it could be a Red Bull or a Monster or a Patagonia. Like, everybody's buying content. We are content creators. It doesn't really matter who our buyers are, whether it's traditional TV or digital. We got to get into these professional markets, and they're bloody expensive. I got to tell you straight up. So when you go to these things, take advantage of every little bit of it and increase your position of thought leadership. If that means calling them up and saying, listen, I've got an expertise, I can lead a panel, or I can be a keynote or have a workshop, or I can even volunteer, whatever it takes to get you a little bit more elevated than just being a regular delegate is critical. Because when you enter one of these places where there's thousands of other people in your space and you are honored as a panelist or as a moderator or as a keynote, that is huge. I got to tell you, there's so much weight in that. We at Hemmings House have enjoyed many, many dollars of revenue increases as a result of myself and other team members on stage at these big conferences. It's really quite stunning. So everything I talked to you about before in thought leadership is what earns your way onto the stage at one of these industry events. Remember, the industry events is packed with buyers, packed with customers. So don't take this lightly. This stuff is critical. A lot of people are like, oh, when do you have time to do this? You know, how do you find time to write a blog or create a podcast? Well, other companies are spending 15 to 30% on marketing dollars. Well, the least you can do is spend 15% or 20% of your time on developing your brand. And it's as simple as that. It's an equation. Effort in, you get to enjoy growth back and brand elevation. So to wrap this up, you really need to recognize that you're a lifetime learner. When I say go to courses, continually go to courses. You know, you're going to meet people who are in similar places like you are right now that will be lifelong contacts, lifelong friends, lifelong collaborators. So just as a business development expander or a brand expander in itself, just going to professional courses is critical, and constantly upgrading your skills is absolutely critical. Go to markets, industry events, conferences, conventions. At these places, you know, we sold a lot of our TV shows directly from going to these places where I can sit down with Discovery Channel or National Geographic face to face with the buyer. You know, I had lunch with the head exec of National Geographic, and we're pitching our mixed martial arts show to them. We ended up going with another network at the end. We had Turner Networks and the Fight Network here in Canada, But, you know, I am having lunch and drinking wine with these people because I go. Nobody second guesses you if you're there. If you're there, they just assume that you're legit, and you are legit. But if you can go with a little bit of a platform of thought leadership, you're going to be heard quicker, and you're going to be seen quicker and respected a little bit more. So I'm really excited to see where we as filmpreneurs are going to go from here on the thought leadership side. Again, there's going to be a discount for any of you who are paid members of the Filmpreneur community to go into the Boiling Point process. If you want to take that course, totally not necessary, but I find it very, very helpful. And for the rest of us, why don't we talk about this? What are you doing right now that's working? What's not working? Have you tried blogging? Have you tried a YouTube channel? What are the things that you've experimented with? Where do you need help? Let's start having this dialogue in the comment section below, and next time we connect on a webinar. So next week, we're going to be talking about making real impact. And when I say impact, it's not necessarily just impact on the bottom line and making money. That's a big part of it, mind you. But it's also like making content that matters, making content that makes our community stronger and better places. And I'm going to be talking about a few of our projects that the very process of producing the films actually created positive social change. Like, it's a really crazy thing to think about. It's not the film itself at the end that made the change. It was the process of making the film that made the change. So I'm really excited to share that with you. It's something I don't see a lot in our industry, but it's something I want all of us as filmpreneurs to consider as we build our companies. How do we manipulate positive change, make positive change happen through the process of making our films and growing our businesses? I've got nothing else to say. Until next week.